It is Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM, and I'm very excited to be talking to our next guest. She's an MLC in the state parliament, Clare Scriven, born and bred in the southeast from Mount Gambier, and has returned to the region many, many times after obviously working and spending time in Adelaide. Now doing great work on the front bench team with the Labor Party in opposition at the moment here in South Australia. And we've got plenty to talk about with Clare today. Clare Scriven, welcome to Country Viewpoint.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be with you. I will just mention, wasn't born in the southeast, but I was bred there.
Well, that's close enough. What's
right.
I know, being an Eyre Peninsula boy, I think 30 years is what you have to pay to be classified as a local. Have you clocked that up yet?
I have, yes.
Oh, that's it.
Yes. So I grew up in the southeast in Penola and Mount Gambier, a little bit across the border, and then I've moved back down. I'm in Port Macdonald now, not far from Mount Gambier.
Right. Well, you are a local. That's fair enough. So
that's right.
Certainly at home here on our Flow Network, that's for sure. We've got some really interesting topics to cover today, and it's great to have you on. First of all, before we talk about these topics, can we just set the scene? Can you let our listeners know what it is that you're in opposition, the portfolios that you cover?
Sure. So I'm Shadow Minister for Regional Development, for Primary Industries and for Forestry. So with regional development, in many ways that covers almost everything because, as we all know, those of us who live in the country, everything is integrated. One thing changes and it affects another 3 or 4 things around it. So, that's a portfolio that closed in September last year, and very excited because my heart is definitely with the regions.
Indeed it is. And one thing we know about the regions, whether you're from the southeast, the Eyre Peninsula, the mid-north, there are different issues in some of those areas, but a lot of them are common. And one of the most common issues our regional listeners across the Flow Network would have is health services, in particular birthing services. And I've got to say, I was horrified to hear the situation at the Wakery Hospital. Our listeners around the Riverland would be very familiar with this. Our listeners in other parts of the Flow Network would also be familiar with this. Are women being turned away from the Wakery Hospital when they are ready to give birth? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
That's right. So a couple of weeks ago, the government announced, virtually without notice, that birthing services at the Waikerie Health Service would be suspended until the end of March. So there were a number of women who, of course, booked in expecting to give birth at their local hospital, and instead they were told that couldn't happen. They would have to travel to another hospital in the Riverland, so almost an hour away to get to the other hospitals, or even possibly have to go to Adelaide, which would be a couple of hours. So that was really, really difficult for those women. And of course, it also raises the concerns with other women: are these services going to come back? What we do tend to see on occasion in regional areas is that once something is taken away, it's often hard to get it back. So there have been a few concerns around that. We don't have any definite evidence to suggest that that's the case at this stage, but it does make people start to worry in those local areas.
Now, clearly the reason behind this has got to be staffing, and I'm reading between the lines on some comments that the Health Minister, Stephen Wade, made on a different network. I read these on social media, and you always got to be careful getting your information off social media, and I don't want to misquote the Minister here in any way, shape or form, but he did mention an issue of work-life balance for nurses in Waikerie. Now, that to me points to an issue with a shortage in staff. Would that be correct or not?
Yes, certainly, and that's the reason that the Minister gave for suspending the birthing services. He said it was due to an unplanned shortage of nursing and midwifery staff. Now, that clearly shows that they don't have the processes in place to ensure that there is appropriate coverage. And the comments that you're referring to, I did actually see a transcript of those, and it says that the Minister is now looking to develop a strategy for a regional nursing workforce, which really raises the question is why haven't the needs of women in and near Waikerie and indeed women in other regional areas been given attention before this? Why is he now, 3 years after being in the job, saying, look, we'll start to look to develop a strategy? That's really just not acceptable. And obviously having a strategy is a good thing. Certainly I would encourage him to pursue that since he hasn't so far. But local women need a solution now, not just some sort of vague promise to start looking at something. And I was quite surprised to see his comments about work-life balance, almost as though the desire for that is a new thing. I mean, it's not a new trend. People have wanted and needed a work-life balance for many years. It's not something that's just suddenly come out of the blue. So it seemed like a very strange comment really within the context of him basically having to admit that he hasn't been looking at these needs and issues in any meaningful way because local women are not getting any solutions at this stage.
Clare Scriven, Shadow Minister for Regional Development, Forestry, and I've missed one there, Clare.
Primary industries.
Thank you very much. Of course, joining us here on Country Viewpoint today. Now, Clare, you rightly pointed out those comments. I read them, and I must say it raised an eyebrow for me too, because I was trying to work out what he was actually saying by this. Is he saying that once upon a time nurses working 18, 24-hour shifts was okay, and this generation of nurses aren't prepared to do that, and that makes them less? I don't I don't want to put words in the minister's mouth, but it just seemed like an odd statement to make.
Well, it did seem like an odd statement. I think your nursing staff work incredibly hard. There shouldn't be anything that's suggested as a criticism of them for wanting to live a normal life and have reasonable working conditions. I hope that's not what he was implying, but it certainly did raise some strange questions. It was a strange comment. I agree with you.
The main part of the issue, though, is simply, and you rightly pointed this out, 3 years in the job to get this sorted. This is not new. Our listeners in Ceduna would be well aware that there was a period of time recently that there was no birthing services there. So why was this strategy not worked out through that period if this was something new to the minister that he wasn't aware of then? My question to you would be, if Ceduna has been in the past where we've had this issue, we've got the issue at Wakery Hospital now, what regional area is next?
And I think that's the sort of thing that a lot of regional women are thinking. They're saying, okay, if it's being, it wasn't available in Ceduna, now it's not available in Waikerie, will I be affected? Is something going to happen? And we've seen, other services that are suspended. You put that term in inverted commas, suspended for a period of time, and then there's a reason why they supposedly why they don't come back. So those are the sorts of concerns that people do have. And I've had 6 children, so I certainly know how important it is to be able to plan your birthing, to be able to look forward to what you think will be the situation, and to suddenly find potentially a few weeks out from your due date that you can't give birth in your local health service is just really unacceptable. Yeah,
the stress and the toll that takes on families. I mean, it's bad enough if it's your first. I mean, it's an uncertain time, as you say, but, you just mentioned there you've had 6 kids. If you've got 3 little ones already and you're about to have your 4th and all of a sudden you've got to travel 150 kilometres and further away from home to give birth, I mean, that seems
right.
to be horrible. Yeah.
That's right. Is your partner going to stay back and look after the other children? Well, and so you're giving birth alone. Is your partner going to come with you? But then who's looking after the kids back at home? There's all of those issues, and they're difficult to manage at any time. But when there's a sudden last-minute change like this, and it appears to be simply because the Minister for Health hasn't looked in the appropriate, given the amount of attention that really should be deserving for regional women and the birthing services.
The million-dollar question, of course, is what is the solution? How do we fix this long-term? Have you had an opportunity to put your heads together as a Labor caucus, and in particular with the Shadow Health Minister, to talk about what suggestions or what policies you will take to the next election?
So we're going through the process now of developing our policies for the next election. So I talk very frequently with Chris Picton, the Shadow Minister for Health, and he knows how much I care about health services in regional areas, and he's very keen to make sure that we get the best outcomes for everyone in regional areas from their health services.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that in the future, and more broadly about regional health as well, because it's not just birthing services that are an issue. We've got a shortage of doctors in regional areas, which this government, when it was in opposition, said it would address. It hasn't. We've got a few areas to cover in the future on that. But I'd like to pivot now, if we could, and talk about a very controversial bill which will be hitting the lower house of Parliament, not this week, but in the future weeks later in this month, I believe. It's already been through your chamber, the abortion bill. Now, you've got some concerns with this bill, I believe, Clare?
Look, I've got a large number of concerns. First of all, generally, the fact that this bill does allow abortion up to birth. So it removes all the gestational limits. So currently, abortions are legal in South Australia up to 28 weeks, so 6.5 months of pregnancy, and beyond that if the life of the mother is in danger. So that's our current situation. This removes that 28-week limit. So they will be possible up until the time of birth. Now, the bill says that will be if two doctors sign that it is medically appropriate, and that's the actual term, medically appropriate. But medically appropriate isn't defined. And in a briefing that we had that was arranged by the Attorney General, we had health professionals saying, yes, that will include what's known as psychosocial reasons, so difficulties that a woman might be facing rather than, as most people might assume, some severe disability or abnormality in the baby. So that is a huge change, and I think there's been a lot of obfuscation around it. What the proponents of the bill have done is, focus on the fact that this will decriminalise women who seek an abortion. But the reality is that in the last 50 years, no woman has been prosecuted for having an abortion. No doctor has been prosecuted for providing an abortion. So, on the whole, no one has much of a problem with this decriminalisation because it's purely symbolic. It won't actually have any material effect. But what people do have concerns with is the bigger issue of abortion up to birth. Now, there are other queries around how it will affect regional women because, again, regional women are being put up as one of the reasons for another change in the bill, which would allow abortion drugs to be given to women in regional and remote areas. So it's called MS two-step is the one that is currently authorised available in Australia. And we're being told that this will help regional women because they currently have problems with access to abortions where they need to travel for abortions. But a number of health professionals, including yesterday we had a forum at Parliament House, have pointed out the problems with this is that the actual product information says that if you're taking these, you need to be within half an hour of emergency facilities. So if it can result in hemorrhaging, a small number, but nevertheless a significant number.
So Claire, just to interject there for a
Sure.
moment, just to be 100% crystal clear, the expert medical advice says to take those drugs, you need to be within half an hour of a hospital.
That's right. That's the TGA. Product information essentially is what it is.
Sure.
And so it says that. But of course, as we well know, in regional certainly and definitely in remote areas, you're not within half an hour of emergency services.
Right.
So if there is severe hemorrhaging or other severe complications, where are those women left? They're not within the appropriate medical services, and even if they're near a small facility, those facilities generally don't have the kinds of equipment and expertise that is needed to deal with a major complication, a major hemorrhage, for example. So a number of women have said, look, they feel that regional women have said they feel like they're being used almost as an excuse to make some changes, which are really more about ideology than necessarily about best practice medicine and best care for women in regional and remote areas.
You mentioned the term ideology there, and I'd like to just ask this question directly to you so that we can dispel some myths around this. Are you ideologically opposed to abortion across the board?
Look, I don't really think that's relevant. What we're looking at is this bill, which is enabling abortion up to birth.
Sorry, and I certainly understand that, Claire. You're right in terms of this particular bill, but I know that there are people out there attacking you, and they have on the floor of Parliament as being anti-choice. And the way I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that's simply not the case. In this particular bill, the way I read it, is the devil's in the detail. Is that right?
Look, the devil is certainly in the detail. I'm not the one who has proposed changes to the existing law. And the other thing is that term anti-choice. A lot of women have approached me since I've been speaking about this issue and saying, look, I had an abortion because I felt I had no choice. I wasn't offered other options. I was in difficult circumstances. No one offered to help me with those circumstances. They just told me, here, have an abortion and your problem will be over. And for a lot of those women, their problems didn't disappear. A lot of them have had severe post-abortion grief. They have severe regrets, and and say, look, I didn't feel this was about choice. I felt this was about no one gave me any other choices. So I think we really need to be careful about using that term because it doesn't reflect the experience of a lot of women who have had abortions.
I really want to go into this in far more detail than we're able to give it today because I think this topic absolutely deserves such. But I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the conduct in the upper house when this was debated before Christmas, because I've seen some footage of it, and you'd like to think that those who understand our political system and how it all works know that question time is for the cameras. There's a lot of arm waving, a lot of yelling, and all of those sort of things happen. But this wasn't for the cameras, and I have seen the footage, and I tell you, I honestly thought that some of the conduct from certain members of the House was disgraceful. That's my opinion. I'm not putting words into your mouth. And you seem to be at the forefront of it when trying to discuss some of these issues. Did you feel personally attacked during this debate?
Look, yeah, I did feel personally attacked, and I think it's not a useful way to conduct a debate. For something that is so important to women and men across the state, the debate should be conducted respectfully. People should be allowed to speak and give their points of view, even if others disagree with it. I think that is the best way to have a debate. I think it's the best way to get the best outcomes for the state. It's unfortunate when there are occasions where that doesn't occur.
My last question for you today is based on an interview that I did yesterday with Dan Van Holst-Pellekaan, the Minister for Energy and Mining. His comment to me on this particular bill was he expects that before the final bill is tabled on the floor of the lower house, that it will have significant amendments. That's a quote from Dan. Are you expecting the same thing?
Look, certainly I think there will be a number of amendments proposed. Whether they pass or not, of course, is a different question. So, for example, myself and others moved a number of amendments in the upper house, including, for example, to ban sex selection abortion, which, as we know, tends to discriminate against girl babies. It tends to be female babies who are aborted for social reasons more than male babies. And even that amendment didn't get up. So no amendments got up in the upper house. I think there is a better chance that some reasonable amendments will get up in the lower house, but until we actually get to the vote on the day, obviously we can't be sure of that.
We'll check in and talk about this topic again in the future as it materialises in the lower house and see where we are at with it. I feel horrible for you that you had to go through that debate in the lower house, and it's great that you accepted the opportunity to come on our program and outline your thoughts on that. And also thank you for filling us in on the situation in Wakery, and we hope that the situation there gets better. Look forward to having you on the program again in the future. Clare Scriven MLC, the opposition shadow spokesperson, of course, for regional development, primary industries and forestry. We wish you all the best.
Thanks very much for having me, Jason.